Well, so from Canada, the president of the Harvey Locke Conservation, Harvey Locke, joins us now. Also vice chair for Nature Positive, the work at the WCPA, part of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. You are an environmental activist. You are a globally recognized conservationist. You were talking with your conservationist lens, but you were sharing your perspective on accelerating the transition on the ground, on the panel at the forum today. And you were doing it with some of the mainstream corporate bankers. So you had the Land Banking Group as well, you had a UN spokesperson. But what was your lens? What were you saying, Harvey?
Well, I've become very interested in the challenge that we have environmental problems and we have economic issues. And one of the themes of the day has been the idea of connecting the dots. So what I spoke about is, what if we imagine connecting the dots differently than we've traditionally connected them? And so the idea is, okay, if you take the Amazon rainforest, many environmentally concerned people are very concerned that it survive, but it's disappearing. And that's a terrible environmental tragedy. But it also happens to be an economic tragedy if you take a bigger view of how the Amazon rainforest functions. It actually generates rain that falls on itself in increasing quantities. And that rain also falls in the Rio de la Plata basin, which is one of the world's great agricultural breadbaskets, one of the great sources of food for the world. If that forest is cleared more than something like 20%, that mechanism of producing the rain, many scientists fear, will stop. If that happens, then the rainfall in the Rio de la Plata basin is seriously compromised. Huge agricultural problem, huge economic problem for the world. And so can we take a financial lens to that? And if we do, then you could imagine creating an insurance product that people could buy against that loss, but also some of the premium could go to preventing the loss by keeping the forest standing. So that's what I mean by reconnecting the dots. Like typically we'd say the environment requires more funding in the Amazon, and then there's agriculture, and they're not really connected. What I was talking about today is they're actually very connected, and seeing that connection clearly as a biophysical matter allows you to then reimagining how you might financialize some kind of a solution to that beyond the traditional environment needs money, because all governments are pleading poverty and other priorities right now, which is not difficult to understand given the state of the world on other issues.
Right. I mean, you can connect the dots by saying, no fuel, no fertilizers, no food. I mean, we're looking at planting season. We're sitting in Brussels, in Europe here today. I mean, that is a concern. Michael Wirtz talked about connecting the dots in his inspirational talk this morning.
Well, actually, yeah, exactly. And if you look at, so think through what happens if agriculture collapses in the Rio de la Plata basin. You have tens of millions of people who don't have food. Their government's economies are so badly battered that they can't do anything about that. So where do those people go? They're going to go somewhere to eat. And then if you look through, like, who buys that food? Well, a primary buyer of that food is China. And we talk about food price shocks or fertilizer price shocks, but there's a difference between a food shock and an absolute supply problem. And an absolute supply problem is a very serious problem for the Chinese, because they're net importers of food. So then what happens? So you can imagine the knock-on effects of having this happen, and at the root of it is an environmental problem, which is you're clearing too much of the Amazon forest, which is very inexpensive to keep standing relative to these horrific economic losses if agriculture collapses, and all the people invested in that agriculture, which is most of the big commercial enterprises in Europe that do investment would have a piece of that action somehow. They would be hurt. So you're just trying to reimagine the ecosystem of how you, so the way I was sort of gesturing is, instead of thinking of it like this, we think about it like this. Just turn the problem upside down and see if by doing that you find a solution that wasn't visible before.
And you also said that the lens of looking at the Venn diagram and the crossover between the economy, the environment and society, that's a roadmap that is wrong, gone, doesn't exist anymore, right?
Well, the problem is it was conceptually not robust in the first place. We were framing progress on the environment. Now remember, our trajectory has been, at one point, the environment, there weren't even environment departments in governments until the 1970s. So the environment externality, we just ignore it. Then we develop environment departments, environmental assessments, we do treaties, and then this idea of sustainable development comes up in the late 80s, and looking for the sweet spot in the Venn diagram between environment, society, and economy, and the enlightened one would search for that sweet spot. The problem is it's conceptually not correct. The proper conception of the world, this is a matter of iron fact, is we all live on Earth, and the Earth is the context for everything you and I do, no matter what it is. And so humans are a subset of that bigger Earth system. And then the economy is a subset of that human system. And that economy as we know it today is only like 250 years old. It's not like humans can't live without this economy. This economy was created to serve people. It's not an equal competing interest. If it's not serving people, it's of no value. And if the economy, if human society isn't living in a way that maintains human society inside the Earth system, there'll be no more human society. And we've got to get that conceptual framework clear in our minds, or we're not going to get the problem right. But that doesn't mean we stop everything. It just means we think about what reality is and then organize ourselves accordingly.
You live in a beautiful part of the world, Banff, near Calgary in Canada. And, I don't know if you saw, I think we all saw the pictures from Artemis 2 of, the beautiful blue planet, right? I thought it was so interesting. One of the people, in talking in the press conference afterwards said, what stands in the way becomes the way. And I just thought, maybe that's one of the themes that threads through the conversations that we have at the forum.
Well, that's a really interesting way to think about it. The challenge we have is that pretty much everybody from any part of the political spectrum knows we haven't got things right. So what does it look like to get it right is the fundamental conversation we need to have. And I think the Artemis 2 flight, when you see the pockmarked surface of a moon that has no life on it, and then you see this green-blue marble on the horizon that is where we live, and the only habitable place in the universe. And then you say, we're degrading that, and then some people say, well, then we can go to another planet if we ruin this one. Well, that's such a crazy idea. This one provides us with everything for free, and we're going to try to create those conditions artificially on Mars to perpetuate the humanity? It's so crazy. I mean, we have to figure out how to live here and make the system that gave birth to us and that nurtures us continue to function in a way that nurtures us. We do know from deep geology that the Earth can run quite fine without people. And the humans have only been around for 250,000 years, and the Earth is 4 billion plus years old. So it could shrug us off and carry on. So it's in our self-interest for that shrug not to occur. And we're busy encouraging the shrug by changing the climate, killing off life, over-polluting the ocean. We're actively degrading the system that nurtures humanity, and we need to turn that around. And that's what this nature positive idea I was talking about is about.
Last thought then, and what you heard from the panel, did it give you any room for optimism, the map, the path, the progress that we can take so that the planet doesn't shrug us off?
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that there's a forum for agriculture, and then if you take a look at who I was on stage with, I was on stage with a very senior official from the European Union Climate. I was on the stage with the head of investments for Munich Re, on the stage with the Food and Agriculture Organization, and on the stage with a colleague at the Land Banking Group who also works on these questions of nature finance. So that wouldn't have been a panel conversation 20 years ago. We wouldn't even have been in the same room, let alone have the conversation. So just the fact that people are, okay, this stuff is somehow connected, we better be talking to each other, And we better be listening in new ways. And there's kind of a facile thing about you just have to listen and it'll all be fine. You have to listen and hear. And then when you listen and hear, then you need to imagine how your needs and the speaker's needs could be met. But you have to be willing to say, so do we need to invent some other way for your needs and their needs to be met? And that, I think, is our moment. And I think the Forum for Agriculture is doing a great job of gathering people who at least are interested in initiating that conversation and having it.
Well, it was fascinating to bring the voices together. Thank you so much for sharing your voice and your views. Harvey Locke, enjoy the rest of the forum.
Thank you.